Hi class. As you know, we've been reading Enrique's Journey, written by Sonia Nazaro. And this is a great example of a nonfiction piece of narrative writing. You know that at the end of this quarter, your big assignment is going to be a piece of narrative writing of your own. So our focus today is really to get to know what makes narrative writing strong, and how can we identify the three most important parts of writing a really, really strong piece of narrative writing. So the first thing we have to do is figure out and identify what exactly narrative writing is. So in its essence, narrative writing is a way to tell our stories. And these stories can be the author's own story, or it could be somebody else's. And as we know by reading Sonia Nazaro's book, it can be both fiction or nonfiction, meaning it can be a true story or a story that we made up in our imaginations. Often at the end of narrative writing, the audience gains a new insight or new knowledge. So often when we tell our stories, we tell it with the purpose of maybe changing somebody's mind about something or giving them a new perspective on an old topic. So today's lesson, our goal is that students will be able to identify the three important parts of narrative writing, which we'll define as the climax, the lead, and descriptive detail. By the end of this course, students will be able to locate these three parts and examples of narrative writing, and then edit them to make them even stronger. In this graphic, you can see the basic structure of a piece of narrative writing. So if you notice on the y-axis, that's showing you that complication in the story is increasing. And then on the x-axis, that shows that time is passing. So at the very beginning, we have our exposition. And in class, we often call that our lead. That'll be the first paragraph or two of your writing where you are drawing your reader in with your lead and then providing great details about the setting and the characters. Often in narrative writing, you'll see an inciting incident happen. So something that kind of makes all of the action kind of fall after that, fall into place. Then we have our rising action, our crisis, and then at the very top you see the climax. That's another piece we're going to be focusing on today. What makes a great climax and what exactly is that all about? After the climax, we have our falling action and then eventually our resolution. So the first piece we're going to talk about today is the climax. So great writers really start at the end and then work their way backwards. So before you start writing, you really have to know where you're going. It's the same as when you take a road trip. Good narrative writers, again, they decide what the climax is going to be of their narrative before they even start writing. So the climax is actually the part of the story where the most intense action takes place. You'll see there a picture of a castle under siege, and this is, as you know, my favorite movie, Lord of the Rings. And in both the book and the movie, the Battle of Helm's Deep is the climax. It's where the most intense action is taking place, and it's what every single detail thus far in the movie and in the book has led to. That's the climax. The second piece that we're going to talk about today is the lead. So the lead is the first sentence or two of your piece of writing. Here I have a graph of some great ways to write strong leads. You can open with dialogue, so some interesting conversation that's happening between two or more people. You can start with a sound effect. So if your story, you know, has like some sort of action, you can start with that sound effect. You can start with a question that really makes your author think. You can start with some action that gets your reader excited or intrigued by what's going on. Perhaps a snapshot of a small moment. So maybe something that is just a very, very small piece of the whole story. Or a flashback is always a great way to write a lead. The third piece we're going to talk about today is how to use really amazing detail in your writing. We've talked about this a lot this year, and strong detail is particularly important with narrative writing. And that's because narrative writers really rely on that descriptive detail and sensory language in order to pull their readers into their story. This is really important when you're introducing the setting and the characters in your narrative piece. So this is at the beginning of your narrative writing. Right here, I'd like you to stop and jot on your scrap piece of paper and think of how Nazario, the author of Enrique's Journey, paints a picture in your mind as she writes. So when she's telling you about Enrique's story, could you feel or smell, taste, see, or hear anything as you read the story? Take about 30 seconds to jot down some of those sensory details that you read. Now here you could be thinking about specific things that Nazario wrote, or you could be thinking about ways that you interpreted those words or things that you felt as you read. So again, thinking about your senses, smelling, tasting, seeing, hearing, and feeling. Great job. So we're going to keep these three important pieces of narrative writing in mind as we complete our activity back on Schoolology.